party. And what are people angry about? Besides the fact that we're stealing them blind. Besides that, they're angry about the pollution. That's the thing we can handle. What about jobs? If you want to see a politician turn white on any issue, just say the fill in the policy name is a job killer. They will turn white, just right on cue. They're really more sensitive to that than anything else. I once had a study in which, in the bottom line, the policy was going to cost like 60 jobs in the state of California. And these guys were feigning heart attacks over 60 jobs. It's like, are you guys for real? You realize there's 13 million employed people in the state, and that you're looking at a number coming out of a study that's way beyond the decimal point, way beyond how well the study could possibly ever be done. And you're going into cardiac arrest. You guys need some reality. So that's my world of jobs. Now, what really happens? Well, in the short run, if you were to close some industry, you would lose jobs. And there would be unhappy people. And they would not vote for you. But if you came back a little while later, you would discover people were employed again. They're doing something else. It's very hard to make jobs go away forever in something like California. Now, if the jobs only exist, it's North Dakota. The only reason to live in a place that cold and that far away is to rip oil out of the ground. And maybe oil go away. Yeah, the jobs would go away. They leave North Dakota and they'd go somewhere with a more reasonable climate that was closer by. So I do understand that. But we're California. We have a nice climate. We have huge infrastructure. We have all kinds of activities being done. So you wouldn't expect that if the federal government decreased defense spending and we lost like 500,000 jobs because aerospace got cut down, that if you came back 10 years later, there'd be 500,000 people still shackled in poverty. And what actually happened across there is we lost the jobs, I don't know what it was, 50,000, 100,000 jobs in aerospace, and we picked up the same number and a little more within a couple of years in high-tech computer stuff. And I think a lot of that was the same people actually being shunted over and doing something else. So the idea you're going to make jobs go away in the long run doesn't strike me as sensible. The idea that you have to have cars because otherwise you won't have America, that's craziness, right? If your generation literally were to think about it and say, it was my parents' generation that wanted to drive everywhere all the time and take a month on the road every summer, cooped up in a car. What a bunch of Looney Tunes they were. No, I'm going to spend my summer much closer to home, thank you. Summer means I don't have to drive at all if I'm getting some time off. And I really have this hobby of, martial arts. By the way, Cal has the best martial arts programs. If you haven't gone and visited them, you need to go do that. I want to spend my time on martial arts, not on driving all over the place. Does the economy collapse? Is it all over? No. Life goes on. People still are employed. You just have a different mix of GDP. GDP is not going to go down. Nothing is going to happen. All that's going to happen is what you buy is going to be less car and more something else. You still have the money, and you're still not going to go make a bonfire out of it, and therefore it's going somewhere. It's either building investment goods because you save it, or it's building some other kind of consumption good. But there's no way for it to go away. So the whole concept of we must have this heavy industry produce stuff or there'll be no jobs is just first-rate nonsense. It'll change what you do. There'll be less people standing around running automated welding machines and more people trying to explain to you how to do whatever it is you've taken up doing right, but they're going to be employed. The clean development mechanism. So the Europeans decided to put a tax on carbon. Actually, they decided to have a cap-and-trade program. It's a fixed number of carbon permits, and in order to do something that releases carbon into the atmosphere, you got to get a permit. The permits have value. The value of the permits was for a long time around $20 a ton. Across the recession, no surprise, it sunk quite a bit. Why? You still have the same number of permits, and what's a recession? It's when you make less. So if you make less, you're going to need less permits, so the price is going to go down. Right? There's not a surprise there. But back at the time when it was $20 a ton, people thought, all right, what about the rest of the world who's not part of us? Suppose it were cheaper to go to Beijing to a new cement plant and say, look, if you guys will build this thing right, rather than build it the way you're going to build it, you could save an enormous amount of carbon. A single cement plant is a big thing. Right? It's a 900-degree furnace on the order of twice as long as this room and sort of 9 feet tall. So this is not a small consumer of stuff. So you could go to such a thing and say, well, look, there's a lot of technology to get the same cement out and less energy in, but it costs money. We'll give you the money. You build it right. Somebody will come and, unfortunately, 5 years later, verify that for all 5 years we've in fact saved carbon. This thing worked like it was supposed to. And then we will get carbon permits for the carbon saved. That's the clean development mechanism in a nutshell. Should work. Really should work. You provide powerful incentives to go and find things in less developed countries that were going to be inefficient and make them efficient. There'll be side benefits, which they call additionality. So not only are we cleaning up the carbon, but we're making the price of cement in Beijing lower, right? Because we're being more energy efficient. So good every way around. What's wrong with it is that to get your permits, you get them 5 years later. So you put in money now. And you have to pay the interest on the money you put in for 5 years before you get your permits back. Hey, interest on commercial deals, you're talking on the order of 10%, 12%. So suddenly it's not good enough for the project to pay. The project has to super pay because you only get your money back later. Then you still have the problem. You have to pay somebody to go out there and make sure that the thing really works. Well, I know someone who trades these things, and what he told me at the heyday said when there was $20 available, because that was the value of a permit, right? He said you'd have about $2 left for the project. First, the interest rate cut it in half, and second, paying people to make it happen cut down almost all the rest of it. So you had to find projects that paid, the cleanup paid, not at $20 a ton, but more like $2 a ton. In other words, you had to find essentially break-even projects that saved carbon in order to make the CDM work. So it wasn't as wonderful as you might have hoped. The other great place to save carbon is, and I can only read it, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in developing countries, known as REDD, or REDD+, and I don't remember which the plus was. The idea was to grow more forests because a lot of the world's carbon is caught up in the cycling of carbon through forests. And actually, if you could find a way to increase the world's forests by just a couple of percent, then you could probably offset all of the human carbon emissions. So it's a really big part of the cycle. It just turns out it's very hard to manipulate it. What happens if you grow more wood in California, in anything but the redwood region? What will happen to it? Happens every fall. You get burned, right? And the more stuff you grow, the bigger bomb you built. So if you try to store carbon in our kind of environment, this kind of dryish environment, 600-700 millimeter rainfall kind of environments, what happens is just waiting to get burned. And as you get more and more fuel build up, the chance that when it lights, it will all just go up as a giant bomb goes up. So if you're thinking about a 100-year kind of world and you want to store the carbon on the hoof, if you will, you can't do it. And the system just doesn't do it. If you're in the redwood region, you could do it. Yeah, there's 1,000-year-old trees up there. The thing's soaking wet. And the redwoods are giant, and they hold hands underground. Did you know that? Redwoods reach out their roots, they find the next redwood tree, and they tie in. And so if they get hit by a piece of wind, hit by a strong wind, they're tied to everyone else. The wind can't just easily blow one guy down. It's got to take them all. The wind's not that strong. So they hold hands underground. So they're really a resilient crew. So you could take like the area where Redwood National Park is, which I told you was a total cutover, except for at the very bottom. And you like grow back, you really do change the amount of carbon we're storing. And as long as you're willing to keep the loggers out of there, that's probably going to store large amounts of carbon. So it's a little naive to think, oh, we're going to plant trees in the desert. You've heard that line before, right? And what's going to happen to them? Well, they could be burned down, the beetles could eat them, or they could be blown down, or they could just die because there's a couple of years when there wasn't much water. But if you think you're going to plant a dense pine forest in any of these Mediterranean areas and come back in 50 years and it's still going to be there, you're hallucinating. It ain't going to happen. And all of this stuff that says, if only we could have more forests, most of that stuff is relying on infeasible forestry. I have a project that's feasible. I don't know if we can do it. Our project is to get the people in Dar es Salaam to cook their food with something other than charcoal. So we just want to kill the demand for trees as charcoal. There's a lot of reasons why it's going to be hard to do. Originally, I thought, well, wait a minute, we'll get NGOs to just pay the difference between the fuel price for electricity and the fuel price for charcoal. Times 8 million people, they won't even blink. If I could do it, I could raise the money in a heartbeat. It's $100 times 8 million people, and I get to save all the forests around. I'll raise the money, don't you worry. But then we start looking at their apartment houses. If everyone plugged in their hot plate at the same time, blow every fuse in the place. This is not so easy. Suddenly you have to say, well, wait a minute. In order to do this, I'd have to rewire maybe an entire city. It's not so wonderful. And then, well, maybe we could use bottled gas. Well, they haven't developed their gas field yet. And if you go look at their port and you ask, could I physically bring in to their existing port facility enough bottled gas so that we could just give away gas stoves, assuming we can get out the money and do it? You'd find that the day I was there were, that we could count, over 30 ships waiting to unload because they didn't have the port facilities to unload them. So obviously bringing stuff in isn't going to work. So a lot of these things where you say, well, obviously we could save the carbon, you have to go one layer deeper, and then I'm afraid you'll become a little more depressed. Or you'll be very idealistic, and you'll go in there for the long run. A friend in North Carolina, Pataya Yak, it's a rough pronunciation of the name, and he early learned this was the truth, and he just got used to the idea that he was going to have to deal with small Indian cities, and he was going to have to rewire them. And once he realized that's what he was going to have to do, then it didn't bother him anymore. And he went out and he's had moderate success doing it. But if you think it's simple, I don't think so. So that's my comment on REDD+. I think it's very, very hard to do it. The number of places where it will work is smaller than people think. Verification is going to be really hard. The idea of showing that something different was happening is going to be very hard. It seems like a wonderful idea until you have to do it. The last thing to think about in this generation is a very old idea of this iPad. So how much does something hurt? Well, you start out with how much does it hurt per unit of consumption. Yep. Then you would ask, okay, so this thing has so many grams of its car. Okay, let's start with car. There's so many grams of carbon per kilometer or per 100 kilometers. Then how many cars do I have? How much consumption do I have per capita? Well, around 2 cars per capita. And then how many capitas do I have? And when you multiply that all together, you should come out with grams of carbon. Right? The beginning should be grams of carbon per car, and then cars per person, right? And then number of people. And you can attack any part of it to make it go away. I look at this in the positive. Other people look at the negative in the positive. You attack any part of it. So who did the most here? Well, the people who paid the most were the Chinese by a wide margin. The one-child policy, I have not yet found a Chinese friend who said they personally liked it. The ones who are in my business will tell you, yeah, but having 1.5 billion of us, given how much food we can grow and how little food is actually traded in international commerce, that was not going to be fun either. And so they understand it's an ugly trade-off for them. But they made it. They're the only people who made it. India did not. So they changed population by a lot, I think, when all said and done. Consumption per population, well, that's something that we all want to work on, right? That's a good American kind of thing. No, sorry, you have to be a left-winger. If you're thinking of cars, that's let's make sure that each of our existing cities builds a little more housing in the downtown area because that will have less cars per capita, right, or less miles driven per capita. And then the thing we really like to play with is on the far end, the grams of carbon per kilometer or per car. That's where we produce hybrid cars. That's where we think of producing electric cars. That's all the good stuff engineers get to do. When you add all three together, that determines how much carbon you get coming out of the system. If I look at this, I start refocusing back where they focused in the 1960s and 70s on the population size. I mean, how in the world can this work? On the Nile River Basin, Ethiopia's got about 80 million people. It's growing about 3% a year. The Sudan is doing around the same, and Egypt's doing around the same. So another 20 years, these guys are over a double. How many Nile Rivers are there? 1. And will there be another Nile River when these guys double their population? I don't think so. So they really could push right up against resource constraints, something we won't do here in North America anytime soon. But they could do it. They may already have done it. Let me explain how it might work. So all these Ethiopians, they're becoming lower middle income. They haven't gotten there yet, but that's where they're going. How do they get there? Well, built a big dam on the Nile River to harvest electric power. All right, that doesn't seem so terrible. There'll be a little evaporation, but not a lot. Because an electric power dam, you want something in a really narrow gorge with a giant fall-off, not a big wide lake. So there'll be a little. What else are they doing? Well, there's all of us running around trying to explain to Ethiopian farmers ways they can get more output, because they've got an awful lot more mouths to feed, so they better get more output. Well, how do you do it? Well, one of the guys I saw, I drilled a borehole well. So he's way up, not way up in the hills, but he's up in the hills a bit, and he's on a place that's flat, kind of nice soil. And the weather has a short rainy season, and then it gets dry, and then they have a long rainy season. So you can't make use of the whole season like we would, unless you irrigate. And the long season is just a little bit too short. So if you can get another week or two of growing time, then you get a lot more soybeans. Or what he's growing was chickpeas, hummus. You got a lot more hummus on the same ground. So he dug a borehole well. And he's very primitively pumping the water out and irrigating his beans for a week or 2 a year. That's all he's doing with it. Now, how long is it going to take him, or his wife probably, before she figures out that tomatoes, which you couldn't use to grow, you can now grow? Because if you went to the well and dipped out a little water, you can have a nice row of tomatoes. That's going to happen pretty fast. How long will it be before he realizes that if I got a small solar-powered pump, then I could fill in the 2 months that I don't have rain in them, and then I'd have a season long enough to grow cotton or anything else on the planet? Not very long. What happens when you take water up above? What happens to the guys down below? Is the water still there? No. So what's going to happen is all the guys in Sudan and Ethiopia and upstream figure out how to use their very local water. It's going to happen to the Nile Delta. Yeah, it's going to shrink, right? What's going to happen to the 80 million people who depend on the Nile Delta? Do you see ugliness in the future? Yeah. So I'm these days focused on population. As you put the population in there, something will become binding, and that system is probably water. And when you start, the people upstream start getting the water, the people downstream are going to have an absolute food crisis. And so that's how I view it, and that's why I think what the Chinese did, painful as it was probably the right thing for them to do. And that's where we end. And I will review, and I guess we won't say much about sustainability.